Hey everyone, the first ever Insomnaik podcast is now available on iTunes and soon coming to Spotify. Check it out with the link in the description. To give some explanation and background knowledge for this whole encounter, I was around 15 at the time of this. I was out camping in the middle of nowhere with my family and part of my extended family. I was the oldest kid out there in the RV, so you can probably understand how it felt to have no one else to do stupid stuff with a good 2-year age gap between me and the inferiors. It was almost like Navarra when I got to the campgrounds and met the other teenagers. These are all people we knew fairly well from previous camping trips, so it was considered normal to hit it off with them from the start, acting like we'd known each other forever within an hour. Now to the story. My parents trusted me a lot. Not to lie, I liked my fun, but I liked getting home in time for dinner equally as much. So, when I was gone most of the day with other people from my camp, they didn't think much of it. The only rule was that I had to be back at the RV to eat dinner, and before 8:30 in the evening. So picture this: a group of 6 teenagers 15 to 16 out in the middle of the woods with no adult supervision for the vast majority of the day. Just a recipe for success right there. But this particular day, we found a neat little deer trail we hadn't found in 2 years before we'd been there. On second thought though, it didn't really seem like a deer trail. It snakes through a really thick part of underbrush, maybe 30 cm of clear ground, 3.5 feet clear of the brushes and branches going upwards. It's a really hard thing to pick out of the brush, unless you've either seen one before or know what you're looking for. It was promptly explored, marked with a broken branch outside of the entrance and quickly forgotten. Except, I remembered this special little tunnel at night. So while we were all eating dinner, one of the adults proposed that we play manhunt out in the woods at night. Not everyone was totally on board with the idea, but in the grand scheme of the plan, they were quashed down like autumn leaves. Everyone grabbed a flashlight, and everyone was assigned to a team. For those of you who aren't sure what manhunt is, here's an explanation. Everyone playing's given a flashlight, and they are divided into 2 groups. It's basically like a glorified flashlight tag. But there's a catch. As you catch people, you have to correctly identify who they are, and if you can, they join forces with the hunters. The last man standing gets a candy bar or something, whatever the prize being offered is. That's how we played it anyway. For the first round, I get lumped in with the runners, those who are getting chased by the hunters. We get a 5-minute head start to run, climb a tree, whatever the hell we want to do to evade the hunters. Usually I'm the one up in the tree, but that never really worked out as being the winning spot. So in order to try and secure the win for once, I decide to play cat and use one surefire method as escape. And the hiding spot was the rude little path through the thicket. It took most of the head start time to find the damn thing, but it was well hidden and out of the way. As I passed hiding spots, I heard hushed, smothered whispering between siblings who were questioning my actions, like a bird's wings rustling when it's fluffing its feathers. It should be noted that I had bat hearing. My ears are possibly my greatest asset in this game, but when I'm reaching the destination, I hear the short blast of an air horn announcing that 5 minutes are up. I swan dove into this little path in the undergrowth, shuffling on my hands and knees until I'm about halfway in, crouching down like some huge quill. The hunters are doing an initial sweep through the trails looking for obvious hiders and people caught out trying to change spots. When they finally reach me though, they reach a dead end and go straight back. I try to readjust myself and crawl further down the tunnel. I honestly don't know how it happened, but I found an even more hidden path within that one, and accidentally I dragged my stupid body down the rabbit hole, except instead of ending in a dead end, it ended in a slightly hollow. I don't ever want to describe exactly what I found there. I'm sorry but I can't. It was a young woman who had been there for a long time. I'll leave it at that. I screamed and froze. My body shuddered. Stains from the body actually formed on my jeans. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. I just froze there, like marble for what felt like hours, and then I heard someone else coming along the path. Have you ever been so scared that for one insane moment, you truly consider something incredibly stupid as a viable option of escape? That was one of them times. I let out a short, trembling whimper and start moving. Whoever was on the path stopped and eagerly started moving forward again. I can hear their panting, uneven breaths of a man, a horrible marker of whoever it was getting closer and closer to me by the second. By some wondrous, beautiful miracle, he misses a path leading to the brushy hollow. I then hear him moving further down past where I am, but there's constant clicking noises. The occasional effort to remain silent and sharp noises. He's very close towards the entrance but moves on. I hear a low curse somewhere towards the end of the tunnel, and I blast out of the undergrowth like a bullet, making cracks the whole time, and obnoxious rustling is all around me as I heard the man sharply intake a breath beginning to move towards me. The hoarse-deep panting was getting closer and closer to me, a testament to how slow I was at exiting. Somehow I exploded out of the entrance, got onto my wobbly, half-asleep legs, and started booking it down the trail. The unknown pursuer was close behind me for a bit, but it seemed like he was too exhausted to chase me for long. I know everybody loves to rip on the fact that people in horror movies always move slow and trip, but in all honesty, tripping is something I'm amazed I didn't do. With adrenaline coursing through me at the speed of Usain Bolt, I managed to get out of there. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached the main trail running back to the camp, and sprinted down it screaming bloody murder. Confused faces looked out from the trees. I think someone called after me. Reaching the camp was easy, but trying to explain why I woke up everyone was not. I remember when I choked out the words, a profound silence set over the camp. I really don't remember a whole lot from that point on. I know the police are called, and my mum and auntie ran shrieking and wailing along the trail calling for other kids to come back. When someone's yelling like that, you don't ignore it, and they round up everyone in 30 seconds flat. The police find a man out in the woods, creeping along the trail clutching a knife. A black garbage bag with lots of sharp instruments, and a saw was found on the abandoned trail, some speckled with dried blood. I don't think there's really any getting over it. I still have nightmares of the man chasing me, breathing heavily down my neck trying to catch me.
A rest stop for the night. Forgive me for the horrible formatting. I am doing this on a new tablet. I've been addicted to reading these stories and needed to create an account to submit this story. About 3 weeks ago, my mum told my brother and I this story. Straight up gave me the yucky feeling. Sally was a lifelong family friend. Sally would frequently visit her friends and family in Oklahoma. We live in a small town in southern Ontario, Canada. Sally would drive. Sally would drive straight, 20 hours at least, overnight, to get from our town to another town. She did this simply to save money, and obviously wanted to arrive as soon as she could. Now that you got my prelude, here is the story. About 30 years ago, she decided to head south on a visit. No big deal, she's done this a few times. So she packs up and heads out. At some point after driving about 4 to 15 hours, she started getting pretty tired. Being as it was probably the 80s, it was a little safer. She decided that she would stop at a rest stop. It was more of a traveler's stop, my mum said, to sleep for a little bit and resume her drive first thing in the AM. She parks in a very well lit and busy rest stop. She parks right by the lights and felt at ease because there were an abundance of travelers stopping and going. She gets out for a bathroom break, comes back and settles in her car. About then, an RV pulls up beside her, and elderly couple get out. The man asks her about coming from Canada. They strike up a little conversation. Nothing odd. The couple talk to Sally for a bit. They tell her they are driving from the south, going north, and just needed to have a sleep for the night. They wanted to talk because they were unsure if a rest stop was okay to stop at, but seeing Sally, they were at ease. They say good night and good trip, and the couple went back in their RV. Sally locked her doors up and went to sleep. 2/3 of an hour later, Sally woke up with a really unsettling feeling. She looks around. Nothing. A few people going in the stop. Parking lights are all on. She assumes she is feeling bad because she's tired and a car isn't the best to sleep in. After 10 minutes, she said that this feeling actually got worse, and it was a jarring, queasy, uneasy feeling. She sits back and tries to shrug it off. This didn't work, and apparently she had every red alarm and instinct telling her that she needed to go. She panics, starts her car and peels off. She doesn't care where. She just knew she had to get away from there. So about 20 miles down the road, she finds a motel and gas station/restaurant stop. She decides to see if she could get a room for what little money she had. She converses with the person in charge. He cuts her a deal, and he doesn't want a young woman driving alone at night. She gets a key, pops in her hotel room, and sleeps for the night. No issues, all in peace. Around 9 AM, she wakes up, showers, changes clothes, and decides to relax for a few. She turned on the TV, and what was on it actually gave me chills. There was a breaking news story about an elderly couple killed in the middle of the night. The news shows the RV that Sally was parked next to, exact spot, exact rest stop, and she sees the fast food drink cup she dropped on accident that rolled under her car. Sometime during the night, a man broke into their RV and killed them, then left. Presumably right before Sally had left. The man was never caught. Sally, since then, stopped at hotels for the night and avoided rest stops.
So let me start off. I'm going to say that I'm naturally jumpy. I'm really wary of my surroundings. I'm not a quiet or shy person. I try and avoid people. I do, however, feel like I have a great sense of when something's wrong or strange and try and avoid it. I'm from a small country in Europe where murder or crime is generally rare, so you can imagine that people aren't afraid to walk around alone. However, I rarely go out by myself at night just because I'm from a small town and the surrounding woods creep me out. When I'm with my friends, however, I do enjoy night strolls. So last week, me and my best friend went on our usual walk. We know the roads really well, and together we have lots of fun, so we never think about scary things that could happen. So the first 3/4 of our path is well lit by street lamps, and there are houses around, just not a lot of them. But they are. Then we arrive at the tunnel from when on there's no lights and asphalt road turns into a rocky pebble one. We come from there and spot a white van standing in front of the tunnel to the side of a ditch that runs there. It's not turned on and we're really creeped out by it, but we just joke about how someone's gonna follow us. When we pass by, I mentioned that I think I see a silhouette of someone inside, but my friend gets angry at me for scaring her. After we cross the tunnel, the path turns left, and you have to walk uphill. It's not a long or hard walk before you come on top of that hill and have to go down again. From that point on, you are surrounded by woods on one side, with an open hoops field on the other. It's really dark, but we continue having a fun conversation for about 5 minutes or so, before the lights start shining from behind us. It's not weird for cars to pass there, as lots of farms are like a mile or two ahead, so we move to the side and continue walking slow to let the car by. However, we look back again and realise it's not a car, but actually the white van from before. We kind of freak out but hope it's gonna pass, and it doesn't. We keep walking slowly for another 50 to 100 meters and the van is slowly trailing behind us. When we speed up, we hear it rev up as well, and when we slow down, it does also. I bump my friend in the shoulder, looking her straight in the eyes and say, "Run. The field to the left. Now." We both make a run for it as fast as we can, almost tripping on piles of soil, because there's a lot of them in the hoops fields. We finally jump down and behind one of the bumps on the ground and just wait. The van stops, turns around, and has the headlights on and 2 men exit. They have hoods on, in all black. They're each holding flashlights, shining it frantically in our direction, scanning the field. I can't tell you how harrowing this moment is. I think a minute or so passes by before they enter the van, turn it around, and try and find us. We've never been this freaked out and we just ran home through the field. The houses start again by the end of it, and we only felt safe when we got there. I don't know who the people were, and I've never been followed like this before. I just think we'll stay off that path for a long time now.
Close encounter with a serial killer on a highway rest stop. This encounter happened in the summer of 2006, when I was 20 years old. I didn't get my driver's license until January of that year, and driving opened up so many doors for me that I took a lot of solo road trips to my friend's house in New England and mid-Atlantic states. I also looked young for my age and was often mistaken for a high school student in my early 20s. I was driving alone on I-78 on a random July day, on my way to visit my friend in southern PA for a long weekend. Her parents were away and we had the house to ourselves, and were planning on drinking, hot tubbing, and watching Planet Earth drunk. It had just come out. Maybe run around some cornfields at night. I was so excited and had a great drive, listening to good music, and it was a beautiful day for driving. Right after I crossed the border from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, I stopped at one of the first rest stops to get gas and snacks for the last part of my drive. I have tried to figure out which rest stop this was, and I can't ID it, but it was a gas station with a large mini-mart. Opposite the gas station was the on-ramp back to I-78 West, and parallel to the on-ramp was a dirt road which comes into play later. I was heading into the store when a man in his late 30s or early 40s approached me. He was a stocky guy, decently tall, I'm 5'1", had on a plain black tee and jeans with dark brown hair and moustache and goatee. He had come out of a black pickup truck parked a few spaces away from my car. He had a super intense gaze and immediately creeped me out. He just had a crazy energy about him. I don't really get vibes from people that often, but this was so strange. He stood too close, his gaze was crazy direct and focused. His word choice was strange. Immediately set off all my alarms. He asked if I was from the area, despite my Connecticut license plate, where I was headed and if I knew of anything fun to do, because he had plans later and time to kill beforehand. He invited me to go play mini-golf or watch a movie with him. I didn't answer any of his questions, declined his invitation to hang out, and told him I didn't know the area, and walked away towards the store. I was blown away he asked me to go somewhere with him. It was so random and uncomfortable. As I was walking away, he actually screamed out, "You're gorgeous!" And the volume and tone made my hair stand on end. It was super aggressive and inappropriate. And he startled a family walking out of the store. It was so loud. I didn't turn around but went inside. He came into the store shortly after and was staring at me. So I went to use the bathroom and stayed in for at least 10 minutes, texting my friend about this creep. When I came out, he wasn't in the store anymore, so I took my time buying drinks and snacks, sour bright crawlers and trail mix being my obligatory road trip food, and went out to gas up my car. I was relieved his car was gone, and started thinking about the rest of my drive and getting excited to see my friend. When I pulled up on the road to get back to the highway, I hear someone persistently honking his horn, and see this creep show on the dirt road, parallel to the on-ramp in his truck, honking, shouting and waving at me to drive over to him. He was directly facing the gas station, and he had been waiting for me to pull up. I immediately freaked out and jumped on the on-ramp back onto I-78. He pulled onto the highway after me, and I called my friend extremely scared. I drove so fast and probably dangerously, and looking back, am lucky that I didn't get into an accident, but I didn't know what to do. He didn't follow me for that long, and I think after a few exits, he pulled off. My friend and I had a backup plan that if I saw his car again, she would direct me to a police station the next town over from her house, instead of going directly there, and leading some freak to us. I didn't see the car again, and went to my friend's, but the last hours of my drive, I was extremely tense and anxious. I remember checking my mirrors regularly for this black pickup truck. It all ended well. I got to my friend's house safely, and we had a nice weekend. The encounter was definitely creepy, but over the years, I didn't put much thought into it. A few years ago, 2014, I was talking with another friend who was big into serial killers, and mentioned my encounter, jokingly suggesting this was a serial killer. I had met and told her my experience. She was fascinated, and wanted to Google active serial killers in the Pennsylvania area at the time. The first hit was for Adam Leroy Lane, and he looked almost exactly like the man I met back in 2006. Obviously, it could be my mind, filling in the blanks, but the basic characteristics: 40s, tall but stocky, brown hair with mustache and goatee, and the time, area, all match. In my memory, he was a little bit slimmer than the picture, and it was 2006, not 2007, when he was actually convicted of murdering women. Still, it's an odd coincidence, and one I've never forgotten.
I remember something that happened to my best friend, and I, a few years ago, figured I might share it. While my best friend at the time and I were seniors in high school, we went on a trip to visit my grandma a couple of hours away from my town in Georgia, USA. The town we lived in was comparatively small for the state, but was one of the biggest towns within a few hours. But we had to travel about 2.5 hours through tiny, somewhat redneck towns to get to my grandma's place. We're on our way back home when we had to stop at the gas station literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I'm talking cornfields, cotton fields, streets with no signs or lights, not even stop signs, and definitely no cell service. The convenience store attached to the gas station had maybe a couple of snacks inside, but looked deserted from the outside. No other cars or people in sight, I mean. And we didn't even bother to get anything other than gas. I pay with my card, mainly because I don't want to leave my 5'1", 100-pound friend alone in the car while I go inside. Another car pulled up on the other side of the single gas pump while I was just starting to pump gas. And because of everything I'd read on here, I already had a weird feeling and decided to stay alert and stand outside of the car with my driver's side door open while I pumped the gas. I want to see what's going on though, and I see a thin 50-ish old man get out of his car and seem to be paying at the pump and standing beside his car while he got gas. But after a few seconds, he walked around the pump to maneuver himself around my car, to stand within only a foot of me, asking if he could pump my gas for me. Luckily, the gas nozzle was locked, so it was pumping without me having to hold it, and I immediately placed myself between the opening door and the man, and prepared to either shut the door with me inside it, or move it and slam it behind me to protect my friend if necessary. I calmly told him that it was fine, no thank you. He looked me up and down with the corner of his lips tilted up and said, 3 girls like you shouldn't be out here all alone, and you definitely shouldn't be here by yourself. Let me help you, baby, and covered my hand with his own as he reaches for the gas pump that I'm holding. I mean, literally I'm holding it. I jerked my hand out from underneath his and slammed my car door shut, thinking the last thing I'd want is him jumping in my car and driving away with my friend in the passenger seat. Orange flags start tinting red, and my usual overly polite demeanour turned serious as I remembered something I'd seen here that said it's better to be safe than sorry. So I responded, "Sir, get away from me. I can pump my own gas and I've already said no thank you. Leave us alone." He doesn't move, only raised his chin and manages to make eye contact with me, all lip tilt gone. I stared him down and figured I got enough gas to last us the time that we needed to get the hell out of wherever we were. So I maintained eye contact and pulled the nozzle out and basically threw it back onto the pump before getting into my car and drove away before he had even moved. As we drove away, I glanced in the rear view and saw that his car wasn't even being filled up with gas, telling me he was driving by and deciding to help a damsel out in distress. My friend's literally shaking the entire ride home, telling me she would have just let the man pump her gas, but she's glad that she's with someone so confident. It's a creepy, helpful man in the middle of nowhere in a ghost town in Georgia. I hope I never see you again.
Please, don't shoot me. Here's a little bit of backstory. This happened back in the fall of 2016. I was a newlywed, 18, and moved halfway across the country to live with my husband. I was in a new town and had no friends. My husband deployed in the early spring of 2016. A few months into deployment, I was lonely and wanted to head home. I decided to make the 16-hour trek home alone. I packed up my essentials and my cats. I left at 11 p.m. because I couldn't sleep. I was about 4 hours into my drive, and I was growing tired. I pulled into a well-lit public rest stop so I could catch some shut-eye. I pulled my car into a spot right under a light, and I made sure cars were nearby. It's about 3 in the morning at this time, and I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I hear a knuckle tapping on my driver's side window. Sleepily, I wake up and see an older man, about mid-40s, kneeling down to my window. Stupidly, I open my driver's side door. Man. Please, don't shoot me! Me. I won't. What do you want? Man. My wife and I are stranded here. We need money. Do you have some? We're right over here. Points to a van parked in the dark off behind him. If you want to follow me. Me? No man. I'm good. I don't have any money, I'm sorry. At this point, I'm beginning to feel like something is wrong. Man. Oh, come on. I swear I'm up to no harm. Come over to my van. My wife is in there. Me. Sorry, but I have no money. I'm using the rest of my money to go home. Man. All right, miss. God bless. God bless. With that, he stumbles off to the next car on my right to do the same thing. By now, I'm wide awake, and I'm feeling scared. I turn on my car and peel out of the lot. I don't know what he wanted. I didn't see a woman in the van he kept pointing at, but I didn't want to find out. Man in the rest stop parking lot, who most likely wanted to kidnap me? Let's not meet again.
This happened to me a few nights ago. I'm a 25-year-old female, 120 pounds, and I was out with my thoroughbred Shane, doing fitness work on the cross-country course. If you guys don't know what that is, imagine a huge area full of fields, ditches, woods, with jumping places. Basically that. We're getting ready to head in from an evening of hard work. It wasn't dark, but slowly getting there, prompting me to head in for the day. As we're walking around the area we'd been working, my horse started refusing to go near a patch of woods. He had gone by it several times that evening, so I urged him to investigate. It was then that I heard that I must believe is a human voice. I realised somebody had been watching us the entire time. Now the property's on almost 1,000 acres, and this section is nowhere near a road, so this person had been very intentionally making their way very close to where a rider could potentially be. I don't want to startle the horse, so I calmly turned him around and began a fast walk around the patch of woods, giving it a very wide berth, with intentions of heading straight out of there back to the main barn. As I got to the middle of the field, however, Shane halted, and although by then it was almost dark, I realised something. There are people in the woods across from the one in front of me, which is my safest exit. So I now have somebody in the woods maybe 50 yards or so behind me, and what sounded like multiple people in the woods 50 yards or so in front of me. I briefly considered taking another exit route, but as I mentioned before, this was very far off the main road, so my immediate thought process was that they didn't walk there. Yeah, Shane and I couldn't have beat them to the gate, but if they had a vehicle of sort, they would catch up as I was opening it. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds and simultaneously came to the conclusion, if we go now, we will beat them. We basically bolted across the field, slowed up slightly to cross a ditch in the woods, the one they were trying to surprise block me at, and flew to the gate beyond it. I jumped off, unlatched the gate and didn't even stop to mount the horse. He's very tall and I'm of average height. English saddles are different than Western, and I'm not that one of the cool people who can just swing up. I just grabbed his reins and together we bolted to the barn. So I can hear things in the distance now. They're hollering, "There's people out there at the entrance, guys, come here." As soon as I started making a fuss, a four-wheeler started up from just behind the gate and hauls away. A police report is made, and the next day there was evidence found of 3 four-wheelers, so that makes sense since I was seeing multiple people, and yes, they were surrounding me. We aren't going to stop riding out there, but the barn owners are taking some precautions and we won't be out there alone or at night anymore. I have no idea who they were or why they were following us, but it freaking terrifies me. I'm so thankful that my horse was hypersensitive to the surroundings, because without him forcing me to pay attention, I may never have noticed what was happening.
My sister met a killer. My sister, whom was 20 at the time, was stationed in England. She's Air Force at that time. She unknowingly had entered a very unsettling friendship with a man around the same age as her. They worked the same shifts and hung out on a regular basis. As their relationship got closer, he would start to push the boundaries more and more. One day, he had come over to her dorm and had stripped naked behind her and changed into his gym clothes. He would try to touch her and even get mad and scare away her other male friends because he was jealous. It got to the point where she would run into him in public and completely random places and wait outside her door for hours. When things started to get abusive, she told him to leave her alone. He did for a while, but then she started to get phone calls from him in the middle of the night. They were of him, heavy breathing into the phone. One night she got the call that would haunt her for life. While they were friends, he used to house sit for a family who was out of town on holiday. They had a cat who he would also watch for them. My sister had met the cat and said he was the sweetest thing. Yet her friend grew to deeply hate the poor thing out of seemingly no reason. So this phone call. It started out with a deep breathing, and then he spoke. His voice, it was creepily calm, and he proceeded to tell her what had happened with long, slow pauses in between. He talked about how it was late, and the cat was meowing out of hunger and interrupting his TV show. He finally had it, when the kitty sat in his lap and fell asleep. He got up, grabbing a can of food, and went upstairs to the bathroom. He filled the tub with boiling water and opened the can of food. He waited for what felt like ages when he finally heard the soft chirps of the fluffy critter. He let the cat eat, and then he grabbed the helpless animal by the neck and drowned it. Later he drove to the beach and tossed it into the ocean. There was a long pause as my sister nearly drops the phone in horror. His breath started to get more heavy and he laughed before hanging up. Her biggest regret was never reporting him. She never saw him after that, and later desperately looked for him out of the sheer terror he would do it again. After asking around for a week, he was reported missing as a missing AWOL airman. Missing posters and the whole 9 yards. He's out wandering England after killing a cat. I remember reading somewhere that serial killers first kill animals and slowly work their way up to children and then adults. The first killing usually leaves a bloodlust for more and more, never to be satisfied. So, to the asshole that killed a cat, let's not meet.
So let me set the stage first. Growing up, I had a neighbour who I spent as much time with as my own family. He also had sons a few years younger than myself, and we're all friends. They lived across the road from us. Behind their house was a heavily wooded area, with a wooden bridge with an overgrown road partially up it. At the end of this road was an old mobile home trailer from the 60s or 70s. It was captured by my neighbour's father, who was a state trooper during a drug raid, and it was used as a hunting cabin for many years. At the time of this story, it was in a horrible state of repair, and by no means was it properly safe to be in. My neighbour was utilising it to store random stuff. So one night, I was over at their house as usual, and myself plus my neighbour's sons were getting bored. At this point it's around 2 AM. We decided to take the walk up to the trailer and sit there for a bit. So we gathered a flashlight and a small lantern and headed up. At first, things were uneventful. There was a light misting of rain, and it's a little chilly but nothing bad. We sat in the trailer amid stored items and decay of the place, with the lantern for about 20 minutes just hanging out talking. We're discussing leaving when we hear footsteps outside. Now I've grown up in the woods, and the cadence of rhythm of steps people tend to make compared to animals is noticeable. There were humans and heavy step, pause, step, pauses. We had heard nothing coming up, nor had we seen anything on the way up. At this point, it's made its way to the door of the trailer and has stopped outside. We called and asked who was there, and we get the usual nothing, then literally more steps and rustlings followed by nothing. I at least had no intention to be trapped there by anyone or anything, and picked up a rather heavy metal rod that happened to be there. We whispered a plan, and after a second, I kicked the door open with enough force to slam it against the trailer, almost shutting it again while my friends shone the light out. But there's nothing. Again, no sounds. Nothing at all. We've gathered our courage, hopping out and looking around for a minute. Still, nothing to see or hear. No footprints. We have a look round and realise there's nowhere for anyone to have ran either. That's the most creepy part. It was like whoever done this to us literally vanished. I still have no explanation for it to this day. The story took place around 2 months. I lived in a rural area, about 40 miles northeast of Kansas City. I'm a 25-year-old male, 5'8" and around 200 pounds, an avid weightlifter, and know how to handle myself. My dad's a retired Marine, so my entire childhood was great and geared around hunting, being outdoors and guns. So my best friend, let's call him Austin, lives out on his family's 140-acre farm in a brick house that was built in the mid-1970s. Austin ended up purchasing the house and 1 acre of land the house sits on from his grandpa. Well, Austin works for the railroad and is out of town most of the time. My girlfriend, let's call her Samantha or Sam, she often spends the weekends with me to keep me company and let her big dog Oliver run and play all over the property. This night, it all went down. Samantha was leaving work to head straight over to my place and get dinner started. I would come home after work and go to the gym. When Samantha gets to the house, she lets Oliver out to run a bit. Now the house is in the middle of nowhere, and you don't end up on this road by accident. You have to be heading there with purpose. With that being said, I recognize all the vehicles that drive on that road. When Samantha let Oliver out to run around, Samantha notices a beat-up Dodge pickup truck driving extremely slowly by the house. There's 2 scruffy-looking men who are in the truck just staring at her. Samantha said that the way the men looked at her made her feel extremely uneasy, so she hurried inside with Oliver and began dinner. I come home around 2 hours after the run-in with the creepy men. She told me all about the description of the truck to the best of her abilities. I told her that the truck didn't sound familiar, and I make a mental note of it. We are hanging out with Oliver when Samantha decided to call it a night around 11 PM. She then went on to my bedroom that has a window at head level. For someone who's over 5'5", I told her that I wouldn't be too far behind her, that I was just going to finish up a documentary on Netflix. Around 12:30 AM, I hear what sounds like a man's voice from outside the home. I stood up out of curiosity, and that's when I hear Samantha scream. I run inside the room and she said there's a man staring at her through the window, saying that he was going to do these horrible things to her, and he demanded she let him in. Here's the thing about Samantha. She's gorgeous. She has a hot librarian look without the glasses. So when she told me about the man staring at her, I didn't think much of it. Hell, I'd stare at her too. Oliver at this point knows something is up and begins to bark. He's not an aggressive dog, but he's protective. I tell Samantha to go downstairs and hide in our gun room / panic room. I follow her down, and that's when we can hear the man yelling outside the house demanding we let him in. At this point, the man doesn't know I'm here, but Sam's car is parked outside, but my car was parked in the basement garage. Samantha sits in the gun room while I open the safe and begin preparation. I put body armor on and pull out an AR-15. This particular one begins in a pistol configuration. I walk up the basement steps and I hear the man trying to break down the front door, which sucked for him because Austin and I put a steel plate in the door frame just to stop this thing from happening. That's when I hear it though, the sound of the side door being banged on. Then I can see there's 2 of them. I can see one now staring in the window with a burlap sack on his head with eye slits. I mean, this guy's tall, every bit of 6'4", but appears skinny, like he's a meth head. He's holding a large hunting knife and gently tapping on the window. I don't think he could see my gun because he had no reaction to it. So now I know that there's 2 men outside my house, both wearing burlap sacks over their heads. Sounding creepy, I know. I hear my phone on the couch go off. It's Samantha. She tried calling the police, but the call wouldn't go through. How could she have texted if she couldn't make a call? It wouldn't have mattered anyway because the closest police station is 20 minutes away, and they have no more than 1 person on duty at a time. So calling the police out at this point is futile. The men keep asking me, where's the pretty girl at? and you just want to play with her and other stuff. Now, I'm usually a pretty laid back guy, but not when it comes to her. At this point, I'm mad. The fight or flight has kicked in, and all the flight is gone now. As these men are standing around 20 yards away from the side of the door of the home, just staring, I'm thinking it's now or never. I fling the door open, flip my 850 lumen weapon light on, and shine it on the creeps. At this point they know I'm armed and not messing around. As I stand there pointing this at them, they freeze for what feels like 10 hours, then they bolt towards me. I fire AR at them. The bright muzzle flash of the gun nearly blinds me. That's when I think, great, I had built a gun with a 7-inch barrel. Anyway, I'm pretty much blind after shooting 5 rounds, but they're gone. No trace of them, which I didn't understand, because there's nowhere to hide at all. They'd have to run 100 yards in any direction to find somewhere to hide. Now Samantha ran upstairs after hearing the gunshots. I told her to stay inside because I have no idea where these guys are. So I do what any hunter does and look for a trail of blood. I see 2 separate trails leading back to the gravel road. I follow the now steady trail of blood to the road, where I see there could be murderers climbing into the same beat up Dodge truck that Samantha had seen earlier in the day driving by, being driven by a third person. I couldn't see the truck because of the small dip in the front yard, this being concealing the truck. When the driver sees me, he guns it, nearly leaving one of the men behind. When the truck finally leaves, the police are called and they came out after an hour. We gave them our statements, and the police told me that I was lucky I was armed because from the sounds of it, these men were the same men that had brutally attacked 3 other women in the past weeks. I thank God every day for my AR-15, and Samantha does too. This is hands down one of the most frightening nights of our lives.
So, this happened around 8 years ago or so. My husband and I were in Bangalore, India. We were staying at a nice hotel in a very high-profile area. Lots of shopping malls, hotels, etc. We've been to a lot of countries, and by far, we've never met such unfriendly staff at any other place. I don't mean to shade Indians at all, but it's just my experience. Not even a single smile. Not even from the receptionist. It's simply rude to stare. Everywhere we go, we get stared at by locals. I dress very modest, but I'm obviously not a local. But during our stay, we had kinda got used to it. One night, after a lot of shopping and walking around, we came back to the hotel. We decided to enter through the back entrance since it was near. Through the back entrance there was a huge statue of one of their gods. Next to it was a pub. It was kind of late too. We saw a lot of stuff hanging around the pub. They were off duty and clearly drunk. As usual, they stared a lot. We ignored and went to our room. After some time, my husband decided he was hungry and wanted to get something to eat. The hotel restaurant was already closed. I wasn't hungry since we had something at a coffee shop a little earlier. So, he said he would go to another hotel nearby that had a 24-hour restaurant, get food and come back to eat ASAP. I was too tired by now to accompany him, so I told him I would like to rest. He leaves and now I'm just in my undies, relaxing, watching TV. Just a few minutes after my husband left, there was a knock on the door. Now my husband had the key card. He wouldn't need to knock, plus he knocks different. I didn't answer the door. There were no peepholes to check who was on the other side, so I just lay on the bed, ignoring. Whoever it was knocked quite a lot. I decided to just ignore until my husband came back. Mostly, I was too lazy to get dressed. The knocking stopped, and a few minutes later the hotel phone rang. I answered, and there was a guy. He asked if my husband was there. I told him no. He told me he was staying in another room of this floor and thus was our neighbor. Told me he ran out of water and asked if I had water. I sensed he was trying to find a way to get me to open the door, so I told him no, I don't have water either, and hung up. A few minutes later, there was a lot more knocking. Since this was 8 years ago, I was pretty young and naive, hardly knew what to do, so just decided to ignore it. The knocking stopped and the phone rang again. There was a woman this time. She didn't know what to say. Clearly there were people behind her telling her what to say. She was hesitating and I heard other voices. She soon hung up. There was more knocking again for some time, but I still ignored, so it stopped. I think they gave up trying to enter my room. Sometime later my husband came back, later than expected. I told him what happened and oh my god, he was furious. He wanted to know who was trying to get into the room, so he locked me in the room again and went downstairs and questioned the receptionist. They did not know, of course, but they did not even try to find out. They told us there was no one else staying at our floor. My husband came upstairs and knocked at every freaking door on the floor, still furious. There was one other couple in another room who had no idea what had happened. When he came back to the room, he hugged me really tight and thanked me for not opening the door that night. We changed hotels the very next day, and all we did was leave them a bad review. So whoever was trying to get into my room that night, let's not meet. I suspect it was more than one guy too.
This story happened to me back in mid or late November. A little background information before I start the story. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I live in a pretty rural area in Tennessee, at the base of the Cumberland Plateau. That's the southern part of the Appalachian Plateau in the Appalachian Mountain Range, where I can't even get internet hooked up in my house, so I have to use my mobile data on my phone if I want to use the internet. Anyway, I don't really enjoy being so far out in the country. I love the outdoors, always have and always will, but I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't live next to the most modest or upstanding citizens in my area. But that really didn't bother me and my boyfriend when I purchased our home. My boyfriend and I have two very protective dogs, Roxy and Crackerjack. We also have grown up collecting and shooting firearms, so we feel genuinely safe being at the home alone. Our house sits on 2.5 acres, and our closest neighbour is about 3 acres away on his land, so no one really bothers us and vice versa. Anyway, onto my story. It was my off day, and I was enjoying my night off from work. My boyfriend and I both work second shift, and he works as a processing technician at a local factory. He normally gets off at around 11 at night, and is home around 11:30 or midnight. But that night, my boyfriend had called me early in the shift, and told me that his third shift process tech called out, and he would have to stay over and be around at 2 or 3 in the morning. No biggie. I've had to stay in my house overnight plenty of times alone in the 2 years that I lived here, and like I said before, I have 2 dogs as well as several handguns in the home that I'm not afraid to use in case an intruder attempts to break in. So around midnight, I get pretty tired of trying to stay up, so I decide I'll take a 2 to 3 hour nap until my boyfriend gets home. Then I could try to spend some time with him and not be dead tired. So I get in the bed with my 2 dogs and go to sleep shortly afterward. Then around 1:30 in the morning, my bigger dog of the 2, Roxy, starts growling very deeply at the bedroom window. This wakes me up, and I tried to get her hushed or whatever because I'm thinking she's probably heard coyotes or some animal outside. She then starts barking extremely loudly, and I hear something crash and fall outside against the bushes in my bedroom window. This is kind of weird, but I'm not panicking. Now, I wake up completely, and so does my other dog Cracker. So just as confused as I am, but not Roxy, she bolts to my bedroom door and starts scratching it, and is still going crazy while trying to get out. Then quickly, I get up out of bed and grab my revolver that's under my bedside since that's always loaded. I start heading towards the front door, following Roxy, who's there within 2 seconds. Roxy then starts acting like she's about to break down the front door while still barking and growling. Then I thought for a second, should I just open up the door and just let her get whatever is outside? Or should I look outside the window first to see if it's just an animal like a coyote or fox, so she doesn't run off in the night and chase it? I decide to look out the window because it's beside my front door. What I saw next shocked and honestly scared me. There's a man wearing a short-sleeved tank top, just standing there staring at the side of the house. He sees me but starts running away and ends up running on the road. Even though I had my dogs and a loaded handgun, I felt truly scared. I think, oh hell no. So I think for a second, should I call my boyfriend or the sheriff department? I decide to call the local sheriff department first, of course. Whenever I'm on the phone with the dispatch, I had told the lady what happened, and also told her that I thought it was very weird for someone to be running away from the house and up the road into in middle-late November wearing jeans and a tank top. The dispatcher agrees with me that it's very strange, and that they would send a sheriff's deputy out to my area immediately so they can look for the guy. She then says to me, do I want a sheriff to come by my home after they look for the guy? And I said yes. I want to make a report. So then after I got off the phone with the dispatch, I called my boyfriend and told him everything that happened. He immediately left work and came straight home. Right away, he started looking all around the outside of the house for the guy that I saw, but can't find anything. We wait for nearly 2 hours to see if the sheriff's deputy was going to come by or not, and they never did. I never got to do a follow-up because my local sheriff department does not have a way to follow up with them. In the days that passed after the incident, my boyfriend thinks it was someone shady who lives a couple miles up the road from our house. Several of his co-workers who are familiar with the area and where I live said they know of a guy that lives a couple of miles out who's notorious for being a weird creeper and a thief. One of his co-workers even said, unless you have something bolted to the floor, he's going to try and take it or peeve on you during the night. I'm very grateful that I had my dogs with me that night, and that Roxy woke me up and alerted me to a possible intruder. That man should count his lucky stars that I didn't decide to let my dogs out after him, and that he decided to run away instead of breaking in, because if he made it inside my home, he would have met my dogs that are very overprotective, as well as had a bullet in his skull, before he would have even got the chance to react.
This story takes place some time ago. I was around 13 years old at the time. At the time, I was staying with my mom and older sister at my late great-grandfather's cabin in the middle of the woods. It was a dark night around mid-August, and we had been spending the summer there. Now, this cabin has always had its distinct personality. My great-grandfather had built it himself after he finished fighting the war during World War II. The interior is made up entirely of dark wood. The furniture still has that old pre-war Nordic and Eastern European feel to it. Caroline-style, hand-woven carpets line up the floors, and the walls are decorated with old, worn-out framed photographs of unknown but serious-looking relatives of my family from the past. The house has always had a somewhat mysterious, a little offsetting but still calming feel to it. My sister and I, being curious kids, had just on the previous day looked through some old photo albums belonging to our great-grandparents that we had found in the library. A decision we had both regretted. As it turns out, it was customary back in the day to photograph the dead. As you could guess, the albums dated after the war were filled with photos of dead bodies sitting, laying next to their relatives. We went through the albums and there were tons of them, from grown-up adults to little dead kids to actually babies in tiny coffins. And what made it worse was almost all the photos were taken unmistakably right in front of this cabin on the yard. We shivered and wondered if the bodies had been buried here too, but decided in that moment together we would never ask about it. I mention this photo album in detail because it's relevant for understanding why I was already feeling creeped out that night. That evening, me and my sister had decided to sit in the candlelight living room and read horror books together, because why not? We were staying in an old cabin after all, and it felt atmospherically appropriate. My mom, being a night owl and insomniac, had decided to go for a sauna and a shower in the middle of the night. The cabin's wooden sauna is located in the stone basement of the cabin. Another important detail to note is that this cabin is in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest. There are a handful of neighbors who all live at least a kilometer away. The whole community has lived there for generations, and everybody knows everybody, so as a rule, we never had a habit of locking the front doors when staying there. The only person that ever locked the front door to the cabin was me, and I always did it accidentally by slamming the door too hard so it automatically locked. So, it was midnight. My mom was down in the basement, and me and my sister were reading horror stories in the living room. We were in a mostly light mood, despite both of us feeling a bit creeped out, when suddenly, out of nowhere, we hear a faint knock on the door. We both jump up. We barely ever had visitors during the day, and nobody has ever showed up unannounced during the night to this place. We decide in that moment we were probably mistaken and feeling spooked by the stories, and it must be the wind that was making the noise. But no, the faint, calm knocking came again, then louder knocking followed. We realized that undeniably there had to be somebody out there, and that they wanted to get in. In horror, we both ran to the kitchen to grab something to defend ourselves with. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, and we had a quick chat on whether or not we should go to the basement to get our mom. The knocking continues, and this time whoever it was wasn't knocking on the door anymore, but they had moved to the curtain-covered window next to the door to knock on it instead. My adrenaline kicked in, and I was feeling a little braver, so we decided to walk slowly towards the front door, and I decided to take a peek out of the window. I moved my curtain slightly to the side to take a look. However, I see nothing but darkness out there. I close the curtain and turn to my sister, when suddenly, that somebody tries to pull open the door aggressively. We both flinch, but thankfully, as I was the last person to enter the cabin that evening, the door is locked. At this point in time, it's just us, two kids with kitchen knives, and some strange person trying to get into our cabin in the middle of the night, and the only thing separating us is an old wooden door. At this point, we've had enough spooks, so my sister runs down to get my mom from the basement as I stand shakingly by the door holding a big-ass knife. I hear footsteps on the front porch, but no more knocking or attempts to open the door. My mom comes upstairs, and she seems to be in disbelief that anyone would be trying to get in at this hour. We all stay in the living room waiting for more sounds, but an hour passes by and we hear nothing. Until suddenly, we hear loud, panic knocking on the door. We all jump at that sound, and my mom goes rapidly to the window to open the curtain and checks who it is. Suddenly, upon seeing who it is, she mutters, "What the?" and slowly opens the door. We hear her exchange a conversation with a woman whose voice is familiar. We walk over to check who it is and realize that it's our aunt, my mom's sister, who lives on the other side of the country, standing in our front porch in the middle of the night. She looks scared and panicked, and my mom keeps apologizing to her. No, you can't stay here. I'll order you a taxi so you can be somewhere safe," and closes the door. After some time, we see a taxi arrive and watch her leave with it. Our mom double checks that the door is locked and comes over to us looking worried. We ask her about what happened, and she tells us that her sister had told her that there had been some dispute and that now she's being chased by a handful of dangerous and angry men that want to kill her and are trying to track her down. She's been trying to run and hide from them for 2 days straight now. She's always lived kind of on the wild side of life, but this was something new. The part of this story that really gives me chills is that the aunt claims she had just arrived at our front porch at that very moment when we all heard the panic knocking on the door. She certainly had not been standing there quietly for an hour or been knocking on the windows, meaning that whoever was the person faintly knocking on the door about an hour before her arrival wasn't her. We have no idea who it was or what their intentions were, but I know that given the extraordinary circumstances, I would reckon it was likely one of those men that was trying to track her. I still keep thinking back to that night. Whatever could have happened had that door not been locked.
This happened about 6 years ago. A couple friends and I have decided to go out into the woods and build a base camp. We brought axes, machetes, fuel, a tent. We went deep into the woods and spent all day cutting down trees to build a makeshift fence. Being idiots, as it became dark, we realize we have no way to see. We start to realize that if we pour some fuel into a can, we can light the fumes at the top and create a torch. We made several torches, placing them in the surrounding woods. Now it got very dark. We needed more logs for the fire, so I was about 20 meters from our camp. I could hear my friends talking. I was swinging at the tree when I felt something hit my back. I froze and turned around and stared into the dark forest and right at the edge of the lights from our torches. I saw nothing though and assumed that something had fallen off the tree and hit my shoulders. Right as I'm about to swing, something hits me in the back of the head now. It hurt enough for me to make a grunt. I then see a rock at my feet. I'm very scared now. Turning back to walk towards the camp, I could hear my friends and see the light from the fire. I kept turning my head looking towards the darkness, and then about halfway, a rock flies next to me, missing my head by inches, and I mean a big rock too. I ran back to the camp and told everyone, and they have a look of terror in their faces. We sat for a while before more rocks come over, but we can't see or hear anyone. There's just rocks flying randomly into us. Needless to say, we didn't sleep. We just chilled in one tent holding our machetes, terrified, making sure the fire was big. I mean, there were so many rocks in the morning. That's what terrifies me. Literally hundreds of them. We were very deep in the woods and literally nobody was around us. I want to say a person did it, but I just don't see how somebody could have been out there completely invisible to us, not making any sound, and why they would have threw literally hundreds of them at us. It still terrifies me to this day.
Before I begin, I'm a 16-year-old male. About 3 years ago, I was in Virginia visiting family over the summer. We were right outside the DC area and staying in a 2-story house near the freeway. On the other side of the freeway was a forest. So, my mom, her boyfriend Eric, and I were all staying with Eric's parents. We had brought some night vision binoculars and decided that night was the perfect time to use them. So, after dinner, we gear up and head out. We pass under the freeway and head into the woods. When we get about 5 minutes into the forest, we sat down our bag and take out our binoculars. My mom looks around with them for a while, seeing a few squirrels here and there. She gets tired of them and passes them to me. I look around for a while, being careful not to look at the freeway for fear of being blinded. I spot something behind a tree about 50 feet to our left. I concentrate on it, trying to figure out what it is. It looked like a pale, bald, anorexic man looking straight at us from behind the tree. I get a bit uneasy, but I'm hesitant to believe it's really there. I ask Eric to take a look, just in case. To my despair, he sees it too. He describes it much the same way I did. Now, Eric is a former amateur boxer, and I train in MMA almost every day, but neither one of us wants to stick around with that thing. We start heading back to the house, crossing under the freeway. We take another look behind us as a car comes by. All three of us see glowing eyes light up the headlights on the other side of the freeway. We say fuck that and head back to the house. When we get back, Eric's parents are asleep and my mom and Eric go upstairs to the guest room. There's only one guest room, so I have the couch downstairs. I'm a little too excited after seeing that thing in the woods, so I end up staying up all night. Around 3 a.m., I'm watching TV and start hearing footsteps above me. I immediately remember our earlier encounter and panic a little. I try to calm down and tell myself it's just one of the dogs, or maybe someone who couldn't sleep. I keep hearing the footsteps for a while, until I hear a doorknob jiggle. I find it weird that they are trying to open a locked door, but try to ignore it. They stop, walk around for a few minutes, and then it's quiet again. I stay up until the sun starts coming up, and then pass out. My mom wakes me up, and I remember the footsteps from the night before. I describe what happened and ask if one of them got up at any time. She says no, and I think it must have been one of the dogs. That is, until she tells me the room above me is the office. No one was in the office, and the door stays locked at night. My heart sinks as I piece it all together. I don't know if it was that thing for sure, but I think it was. I've done a lot of research since then, trying to figure out what that thing was that night. I found 2 creatures that seemed to match it. I think it was either a skinwalker or a wendigo. Whichever one it was, I'm just thankful that door was locked. I know I wouldn't have been able to fight that thing, no matter how tough I am.
About 10 years ago, I was at a relative's house, a cottage in a small Michigan coastal town For my summer vacations, she was almost completely deaf. Because of her impairment, she had a security system that flashed lights and called her home phone, in addition to a sound alarm. This is important for later. I had gone out to see the 4th of July carnival and arrived at home at 11. My relative went to sleep at 8 every night at the latest. When I came in, I turned off the alarm and turned it back on again, like I did every time I came home late. I poured myself a glass of water and went upstairs. Now upstairs, there was a long hallway. At the end of it was a door to a patio overlooking the backyard. We never used it because it wasn't up to code. The house was built in the late 1800s, and many aspects weren't worth the money it would cost to fix them. So there was a decorative antique chair that was propped against the door to the patio. When I walked in that night, the chair was propped against my bedroom door instead. I leaned underneath the doorknob, as if it was put there to try and keep someone from escaping. I bolted into my relative's room to find her fast asleep, her guard dog also asleep. I woke my relative up and she put on her hearing aids. She called the alarm company and they had no record of anything besides her setting the alarm at 6:30 and my entrance at 11. They called the police anyway. When the cops arrived, they moved the chair and attempted to open my bedroom door, but it's locked. The doorknob was original to the home and has no key for it, so the cops and I walked out to the front balcony and used my key to open the sliding door, and everything was as it should have been. And when we opened the door from the inside, it wasn't even locked. The cops searched the entire house and found nobody, and nothing was missing. I have no idea why there was a chair barricading my bedroom door and why it appeared locked when the lock wasn't even turned. The police sent me for a fingerprint kit and they found no fingerprints on the chair, not even my relatives, and no one knew why. I had trouble sleeping in the room after that. The police kept an undercover cop outside for a week since my relative was a beloved member of the community. Nothing fishy happened. A few other creepy things happened, but nothing compared to that. When I was young, my mum lived with me alone in our big house that she inherited. Now when I was a lot younger than I could remember, my mum always told me that she'd get annoyed because I'd always play a game pretending I saw someone. I'd say that he come from the ceiling almost, and that he would speak to me. Apparently he was never threatening, but he would just like to talk to me temporarily, then leave. Being so young, she thought I just had an imaginary friend. But when things started to go missing around the house, she began to think otherwise. Well, it turns out that one day she had a friend of hers over who was also a cop, and he was telling her that they had reports of break-ins in the area. She thought it would be a good time to bring up what I'd been reporting, and apparently he gave her a cold stare and asked exactly where it had been coming from. She leads him to my bedroom and shows where the attic is, and he decides to go up, and what he finds shook my mum to her core, and she's never been the same since. Apparently, they found evidence that somebody had been living in there for months on end. And there had also been reports of a homeless man living in other buildings temporarily in our area. He had recently gone missing, and the time frame perfectly matched when I'd made my reportings. I'm just glad I'm too younger to really remember any of this. The thing that creeps all of us out the most is that he spoke to me. God knows what could have happened if he wasn't discovered sooner. Last year, my family went camping at the same park we go every year. Usually, we also get the same site, which is close to the bathroom and showers. However, this year we booked it late, and we were way out in the back of the park, which is a fairly secluded area surrounded by woods. It was a nice change, but a bit of a hassle. The first night we were there, my nephew woke up in the middle of the night, woke up my sister, and told her that someone was outside the tent. She said something, then leaned up on the tent. He got scared and pushed back. She got outside and there's nothing to be seen. We just dismissed it as trash panda, even though my sister didn't think it was. The second night we had a few friends over. They brought their dog, who is the most well-behaved dog that I've ever met, with humans or other animals. So we're all sitting around the fire when the dog starts barking like crazy. Now this was a super rare occurrence, so the owner got up to see what's going on. When he took the leash off the table, she went crazy and pulled him towards the forest. Now she in fact pulled him a good 10 feet. He obviously wasn't expecting her to do that. She never acted in this way before. I decided to grab a flashlight and check out the forest in the direction she's pulling. There was nothing. She has seen squirrels, raccoons, cats, etc. and never acted in this way. Everyone took note of how odd that was, but again, we dismissed it as nothing. And it did spark up a conversation about the thing outside the tent from the previous night. The third and final night we're there, we could see a storm coming in. The sky was lighting up, the thunder's loud, and the wind was crazy. We spent a good hour setting up traps, covering the chairs, etc. And everyone crawled into their tents for the night, knowing that the storm was going to hit any second. I was the last to get in because I had to pee. I was there at the edge of the site, facing the forest, weeing towards the wind. The storm and forest was spooky enough, but what happened next will be forever burned in my memory. From deep within the forest, I heard the sound of a girl singing, not a fast-paced pop song, but that of a nursery rhyme. I can't make out words, but I was certain I was hearing the voice of a small girl. There were no other voices. I pushed that pee out as quick as I could. The second I finished, I bolted towards my tent and heard loud thunder overhead. My heart was pounding. I was sweaty and possibly a bit pee covered, but I didn't care. In the morning I told my family what happened, but not one of them believes me. One night at my family's cabin in West Virginia, my brother and I were sleeping on the porch. From the beds we're in, you could see the rocks at the top of the mountain. There appeared to be somebody on top of the mountain shining a light or a signal mirror down the valley that we're in, and it stops right on my brother and I. I could hear from all the way in our beds that somebody was on top of the mountains making a hoot or fake owl crawl. Meanwhile, on the gravel road leading up to the house, we can hear footsteps. We ran inside and our parents told us to sleep inside, but they didn't think anything of it. They thought we're just being kids. The next morning they asked us why we're walking around, and when we said we didn't go outside, they appeared very worried, saying they also heard footsteps. When I was 17, my neighbour's son tragically died from a drug overdose. He had just graduated high school the night before. I had seen the guy around but never really interacted with him. However, his dad and mine were the typical close/helpful neighbours, so I had developed a slight friendship with his dad. Anyway, a few weeks passed and His dad comes over with a box of his things he wanted to get rid of. They all belonged to his son. He said if I wanted the things, and I said sure. It was pretty awkward, but I felt like he needed me to have them. In the box is a pair of light blue and white Jordans. Pretty old, but I figured I could use them. I later realised that something's written on the tongue. It's his initials. That gave me chills, not gonna lie. Now I'm not sure why it had taken until I realised that his son had written his initials on the shoes to weird me out wearing them, but it did. This isn't the creepiest part though. A few weeks go by and I'm home alone. I leave my room and head down the hallway towards the kitchen, and as soon as I round the corner, I make out a white figure about 15 feet ahead of me. It felt so strange because I didn't feel fear, more like a weird safe feeling. It took me a few seconds, but I realised that it's him, and as soon as I notice, he suddenly vanishes. I hit the lights as quick as I can and sprinted out of there though. But it always felt like he was over watching me, taking care of me. I've lived in 11 different houses in my lifetime, but only had one spooky experience in one of them. My husband and I were watching TV. Teenage daughter was out with friends. There was an open doorway to a passage leading to the bedrooms right in front of us, and I see a full-bodied apparition pass in front of us. Thinking it's our daughter, I don't think anything of it. But I get up to check and speak to her, and there's no one there. I told my husband, who had also seen the figure, but he thought the same thing. And we never saw it again. I wouldn't be posting it here if only I saw it, but the fact that my husband also saw it and we both stopped talking is what freaks the hell out of me. Well, to put it simply first, I could care less about religion and anything to do with it. This was up until I had a really weird encounter that started to make me question my own faith. It all started from around April 2nd, 2019. And the doctors tell me and my family that my grandpa has around 6 hours to live. He's diagnosed with late-stage liver cancer and cirrhosis. The whole experience was very emotional for me because seeing a man I grew up with for 17 years on the verge of death is just too much to handle. Throughout the whole process of him passing, religion was a really big process as well. At the hospital, a chaplain came many times to comfort us with the promise of him going to a better place. I always thought it was a lie though. I thought if God really existed, he wouldn't have let my grandfather go through this process. Towards the end of his life, the doctors thought it would be best if my grandpa was moved into a hospice. So before we moved him away, my grandpa wanted to call a priest from our local Catholic church to do his last rites at the hospice. I rode with my uncle to the hospice and the whole ride is dreadful. The whole process was just too confusing for me and I couldn't even believe he was gonna die. I was led on this false hope that somehow he would survive. That was until we got to the hospice. When we arrived, the ambulance also arrived. Before he got taken into his room, the EMTs wanted to do their prayers for him. Everyone from doctors to the EMTs to the hospice owners all prayed for him. Unfortunately, the priest never arrived to do the last rites. My grandfather died 5 minutes after he got settled into a hospice room, so much quicker than what we expected. Seeing life going drained so quickly in front of my eyes messed me up. It was unbelievable and devastating simultaneously. I couldn't properly think of anything at the time. Now fast forward to next week. The wake and funeral had already happened, I read a scripture from the Bible for him so I could have some closure once and for all, as I was starting to question my religion. But then the experience I'm about to tell you was the icing on the cake. I fully understand the experience, but I need to put in some background. In my grandpa's room, there's a big cross as seen in the photo, and then right next to the cross was a music box with a photo of what I assumed to be the Virgin Mary. When the string was pulled, a song would play out for 30 seconds. Every morning and night, my grandfather would pray to the cross and play the music box. He couldn't go to church as his condition worsened, so he prayed at home. And he was a really big believer of God, always telling me and my uncle and aunt that his life has to be lived with a little bit of good inside and God. And after he died, we promised that we'll keep the cross and music box in his memory. Now, the experience we had to clean out a variety of his old junk though was weird. Cleaning out clothes, also trying to find photos and other memorabilia for him. Me and my grandma were the only ones in the house at the time. Half of the room had already cleared out. It was mostly just clothes and really random stuff that wasn't necessarily of value to my grandpa. I was sitting on my grandpa's bed while she was finishing up cleaning the stuff in the closet, and out of nowhere, the music box begins playing the same song it usually does. No one pulls the string though. My grandma literally jumps out of the closet in shock. The music is just played by itself, as if it's been pulled. I was scared and confused at the same time. It may have seemed minor to what I usually see on this board, but it perplexes me to this day. How can a music box just play like that, and in such weird timing too? As my grandmother put it, she told me that it was probably the last sign of my grandpa's presence letting us know he was okay, just before he went. Now sadly, no one believed me or her. I've kept this story in for so long, but I decided to tell it because I hope others will understand. I'm just glad knowing that he's made it to a better place. So I listened to a lot of paranormal podcasts while driving, and the one I was listening to tonight said something that brought back a memory from when I was 16. A friend of mine lived in this kind of big subdivision out in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. It was just cornfields and woods all around. One night, probably around 10 or 11, I was dropping him off at his home. This was over 10 years ago, and my car only had a tape deck, so I had a tape adapter thing hooked up to a portable CD player, so it turned my radio into a CD player. After I dropped him off, I switched the CD to this old punk band, a CD I had listened to many times. Well, it's super dark in his subdivision. Like, I swear, they didn't have street lights. I had been out there over 50 times and knew my way. Somehow, I managed to get lost. I don't know what happened, but I had no idea where I was. I thought, this is creepy, but it's only so big, so if I drive around eventually I'll find an exit. There was only one entrance that had a little gas station and a gate. So I'm driving around for probably 20 minutes, and the CD I had put in only had 6 songs on it. All 6 had played and the CD's over. So I was grabbing a different one to put in, and all of a sudden, the most gut-wrenching scream comes through my speakers. I immediately pulled the CD player off the adapter cord and stopped it. Even 13 years later, I can still imagine the sound. It's a woman. It's the type of scream you'd hear if someone's being murdered or experiencing something equally as horrible. I drove the rest of the way in silence, trying to make sense of what had happened. I finally made it out of the subdivision and to my home. The next day, I was still trying to figure out what had happened, so I put the CD back in. I put it on the last song and waited to see if maybe it had some secret track that I had missed out, but I hear nothing. I still have no clue what happened to this day. I'm a bow hunter and I like to still hunt, which is when you're dressed in full camo and walk through the woods rather than sit in a tree stand. Last October, I was coming down a hill into a marshy area. It was kind of late, and enough so that the side of the mountain is covered in shadows. I live in PA where our mountains are completely covered in trees and it gets dark fast. When I get to the bottom of the hill, I notice that it's completely silent. No sounds at all. I feel all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But I've been creeped out before in the woods, so it's not a big deal. I kept on. I've been hunting in this area before, but I've never went down the hill. I continue creeping through the woods, mind you going slow, so you can barely hear my footsteps because deer are hard to sneak up on. And then I hear a voice call out from behind a thicket of a small tree, saying, "Help, my name, come over here. I'm in trouble, help me." And I swear to God it's my brother's voice. But he lives in Nevada, another state, so it can't be my brother, but it said my name. It took me only a second to realise something wasn't right. And when I did, I ran faster than I ever have in my life. Only my dad knew where I was hunting that day. The area's massive. No one would be able to find me in there either. I don't understand how something could have knew my name and sounded just like my brother. I don't know what the hell that thing was, but I've never went back to that woods again. I'll move to the desert with my brother, where at least I know he's around me. Last night, on the 22nd of July, my girlfriend and I were getting ready for bed, and like we usually do, go get our cats outside and head to bed. This time it's a bit different, due to our cats almost avoiding going outside and coming straight to the bedroom. We ignore this behaviour and keep them in the living room to make an easy clean-up if they need to go to the bathroom. We say goodnight to them, then heading into the bedroom with full intentions of going to bed. Now this is important because when we're in the bedroom for the night, there is always shuffling on our silverware, or anything left out will get rattled and moved, even when the cats are sleeping. This time was different, however, and if whatever moves the dishes is actual, something both my girlfriend and I saw it, or them that night. I understand it could be due to disorientation because of working and being tired around 11:30. I rule out exhaustion because I'd gotten done recovering my hacked PS3 account and having to deal with some crap from Sony. We settle in to watch YouTube and head to bed when I get hungry. My girlfriend takes notice and gets up without saying a word, heading towards the door to make some food. As she opens the door, she looks back on myself to joke about YouTube when I see what looks like a thumb off the thumb of Spy Kids, yet it's around 5'10". I instantly call my girlfriend away from the door when she freaks out, running back to the bed saying she had seen something by the apartment door. When we calm down, she explains to me what she saw. A being around 5'11" with a black suit on and an almost LED Y-sign strip going down its black suit, separating just above the chest area. We wandered the house looking for intruders, which is my first thought, but find nothing but scattered clothes that had been placed in laundry bins not minutes before the experience. Where we had seen the beings was warm spots on the ground, like they had been in the same spot for a while, with a heavy static feeling in the room, and a very noticeable drop in the living room temperature as well. I was hoping to shed some light on my situation, but I can't really. I've never had anything like it before in my life. At the moment I'm in hospital, I was sleeping when I heard a child's voice say "Mum" as clear as a bell. I was disorientated from sleep, so I got up to go get my 2-year-old, but realised where I am. My room is near the children's ward, so I turned my flashlight on my phone on just to make sure it's not a misplaced child. I decided I imagined it and sat back down, and the blankets moved around me, but I felt like there was a child's head resting on my feet. On goes the flashlight again. There's nothing. As soon as the light goes on, everything stops. Turning the lights back off. This happens 3 more times. Then the light is off again, and I feel the thing on my feet, then hear a child say again. And now I'm seeing an almost there, bare outline of a tiny head walking around the bed. But each time I turn the lights on, I see nothing. I eventually decide to ignore it and try and go back to sleep again, and sleep I do. Now the weird thing about my experience is during my whole time there, I never had anything like it, or any experiences leading up to it. You'd think if it was all in my head it'd be due to changing meds or something, but there was none of that. It still goes on to be the most scary day of my life, and an experience I've never been able to explain. I grew up on a reservation in the woods with my mother and father. My father worked as a welder and was a terrible alcoholic. His work was far off in the biggest city, so he would get up on early Monday morning to leave for work, which was around 4 hours away by car. My mother was disabled. I don't remember exactly why. I just know she had surgery on her shoulder earlier in life and it forced her to stop working. My father was very abusive to both me and my mother. I had actually called the police on him more than once in my childhood alone. To shorten this up, in my entire life, my father had done meth, weed and alcohol, and ended up breaking his leg once due to getting on the drugs again. So he is too disabled. I'm only telling you this so that I was not raised properly by any means. I can't lie, I'm still very angry towards my father and haven't spoken to him since moving out. With my father being gone all the time, my mum, who was a whole different story, but I don't blame her. She tried her best with everything she had, but she definitely got worse as time went on. When I was little, my brother and I would hang out together, mostly because my mum was out in town, and he needed to watch me. He wasn't very nice to me, and I don't blame him. He had been dealing with my parents for far longer than I had. I don't have the greatest memory, so you'll have to bear with me if you can, please. My mother told me some strange stories when I was older, about some weird things that happened shortly after I arrived. She told me that one day, around midnight, the doorbell rang and there was a knock. Now she was confused like anybody would be. Why would they knock this late at night? She told me that she went to look out the door. Now we had one of those big doors with the glass at the the very top you can peek through. So she did so, and there's nobody out there, so she just opened the door. Remember, we lived out in the woods, 30 minutes out of town. There's no reason for anybody to be out here that late at night, and this was well before my father's drug addiction. She swears on her life that when she opened the door, everything in the house went haywire. All the lights began flickering on and off. The power, it went on, but suddenly turned off again on its own. And just as abruptly as it began, it stopped. She said that after the incident, I would not sleep in my bedroom alone. She'd always say apparently I'd cry and cry until she'd let me sleep with her. She told me that when I was younger, I had a tiny stuffed rabbit that would sing and dance. She left this in my bedroom, and it's the type that you need to press to actually turn on, not one that works through motion detection. She told me that apparently it'd go off sometimes in the dead middle of the night while she was trying to sleep. I promise you, with everything that I am, that this happened. Please believe me. I'm not writing this story as a story, I'm recalling events that happened strictly as they did. When I was little, the first thing I noticed was how I always felt as though I was being watched. I never felt alone. Even in my bedroom, I didn't feel alone. You could chalk it up to all the physical and emotional abuse. I do suffer from anxiety and depression today. Don't even get me started on high school. I was very isolated and felt very lonely for a huge amount of time in my childhood, and of course, I had friends that I made up in my head, and I'd go outside to play sometimes, but mostly watch TV. We didn't have a computer at the time. My brother moved out one day. He was more a wild person than me, and loved to party and drink. So my father told him he had to leave. My mum is still upset at him, but while he was here, there was a few strange things that we did experience, sometimes together, but he didn't see it the same way I did. Now, we used to have one of them old TVs, you know, the ones, the giant box ones with the wooden frame, early CRT flat screen, I guess. This was the first sign that things are really off. This would sometimes just turn right off after I turned it on again, and I had a lot of dreams about it. Sometimes when we'd leave for town, my mum and I, we'd come home, and it'd be on when we sworn it was off, and as cliche as it sounds, it's always on static. My mother was a firm believer in spirits, so that's what she immediately thinks. And like I said, I was gullible as a child, and my mum knew best in my eyes. So of course I believe her. I'm a very, very lonely child. I lived in the middle of nowhere and had nobody I could talk to. So sometimes I spoke to the ghost we had. I even gave it a nickname, but you better believe I'm not saying it. It was horribly embarrassing. Now, nothing really happens for a few years other than the feeling, the same sort of ominous I'm watching you feeling. It wasn't until one night where I'd forgotten to turn off the lamp in the living room that I made my first mistake. I asked, "Can you turn off the lamp for me?" It flickered. The bulb flickered. I was in my mum's room at the time. I used to sleep on her floor. I suffered terribly from insomnia and still do, and I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, in true terror. Of course my mum was awake and asked me what's wrong. I told her, but I honestly can't remember. Some of these memories are blocked out, or perhaps I pretend that they didn't happen because I didn't want to believe them. I'm almost, more than anything, numb to them. It's the only thing I can describe it as, but it gotten worse. This is a separate event, but I'm putting it here because this is how it somehow happened. It's hard to remember the exact date, but my sleep was horrible and still is, so to the days kinda blending together, and it's easier for you to forget things when you don't wake up early in the morning. My mum and I went into town. We're heading to my cousin's. I don't remember the exact reason. It may have been due to my aunt's death, but I'm still not sure. This could have been before she passed. Now, my cousins lived in a very busy part of our small town. She lived in an actual suburb, which is crazy to me, because I had to walk a mile to see my neighbours, not like we had any. My mum tells me that she didn't see this happen, but my cousin told me she believed me. When we entered her 2-story, small and definitely minimum wage rental house, I felt dread that was almost overwhelming immediately, and of course brushed it off. I looked up the stairs. The staircase made me feel terrified. It felt like I shouldn't go up there, but I brushed it off too. Now, my mum then took a seat next to the front door, and I sat down on the couch. Out of the middle of nowhere, a series of loud thuds came down the stairs, fast and frantically, and the front door, which had been locked, unlocked itself, swung open. So did the screen door, then slammed shut. My mum was sitting right next to the door, and she told me that she hadn't seen it. I mean, how the hell did she not see a door fly open? I asked my cousin, and she told me that her daughter wakes up in the night pointing at the corner of her room screaming ghost. We only ever went to see my cousin twice, that time and once for a party, but I don't believe anything happened at the party. I never asked my cousin if she had a cat, but although I'm sure you won't believe this, I saw one at the top of the stairs. When we stepped into the building, there was a black cat staring at me from atop of the staircase. Fast forward to us being home. Quite a while after all of this happened, I was probably starting to get into my teens by this point. Things began getting weirder and weirder around my home. This first thing I noticed is I didn't feel watched anymore, but I didn't feel alone. I guess I didn't feel scared. I've had this idea in my head that my house was haunted by someone who my mum thought was here to protect us. I totally embraced this new household member. Sometimes when I was sitting at my computer, which was my escape from my family, I'd feel a cold breeze around my neck, which I'd call my friend's name and feel it again. This is a mistake. I seriously advertise you don't do this kind of thing. After this, things started escalating. I'd start to hear things from what I could have sworn was on my headphones, even if my computer's off. Of course, I chalk it up to being tired. I wasn't sleeping well in the summer at all. For a couple of nights, I would hear those noises. Now, these genuinely sounded like my friends on Skype talking to me. I could never figure out what they were saying. I'd just ignore it and go to bed thinking, you're tired, you've been up too late. Now, I went to bed one night. I think I was laying on my side, trying to drift off when I heard it. I heard a horrifying scream coming from the right side of my bedroom. It sounded like a girl screaming in my bedroom. I swear to you, my TV is off. Everything's turned off in my bedroom. I dove under the covers and tried to hide, but after I hear this, I start to hear whispering, saying help me. I was too scared to move. I didn't want to see whatever was making those noises, whatever was talking to me. So I, instead of getting up and leaving, put a pillow over my head and went to sleep. Or tried to. Eventually I did. The next morning I thought to myself, maybe it's my mum's TV, but I quickly put that theory to rest because she was across the house, between multiple walls, and the screen was clear as day. I don't think I mentioned this to anyone. I just went about my day until the next night. The whispers were back, saying the same thing. Help me. Help me. I got brave. I was tired of hearing this girl. I wanted to sleep, so I yelled, I don't know how to help you. And it stopped. Please believe me when I say this. I've gone through countless hours of therapy, talked about everything with my therapist. They never said anything to me about them thinking I had some kind of mental illness or hallucinations. They don't know what to make of it. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I was scared of something that was only in my imagination. But this was as real to me as breathing is. Now, in fact, I never felt like somebody was with me after that. It felt so quiet and empty. I told my mum about it, and I don't remember what she said. It was so long ago now. I'd call her to ask, but it's early in the morning, and she's not awake now. There was time after that all happened that I'd be up late at night and paranoid again, like somebody was there, but I never experienced anything similar again. You'd think I believed in ghosts after all of that, right? But it's hard to say. I believe in what happened. I believe that there was someone scared and trapped. I wish I had helped her, but at the same time, part of me says it's not real. I had a friend from school, a native friend, and he told me some scary stuff near the end of high school. He told me things like, my friend took a Ouija board out to the old house on our road and broke down, and tried contacting spirits. He says he blacked out, and when he come to, it's burning in front of him on a rock, and he's been Christian ever since. Or the story of the little girls that haunts his home, or the native triad that lures you in at night trying to take you. There's tons of these stories. These are just the ones I remember. It makes you think, when the sun goes down at night, maybe that's when a whole world comes up. A world of people who are lost and scared. A world of people who want nothing more than to torment you. The most terrifying story that ever happened to me was when I was too young to even know about it. When I was a young child, my mum said that I would always have trouble sleeping. Apparently, she would come to me in the night and I would complain about the man saying the numbers. She just thought it was my sleep deprivation or mind playing tricks on me and never thought too much of it. Apparently, I would hear someone count from 1 to 10 in a very deep voice, and the voice would slowly count quicker and quicker. She didn't think too much of it, but did consider taking me to a doctor. That all changed, however, when one day she was exploring parts of the house that she hadn't went before. This was specifically the attic. She went there when she bought the home, but never had a need to go up there because her house was big but had lots of storage space, being an old Victorian house. Now she notices something strange as she's pushing around near the window. There's something scratched into the floor, and she's not seen it before. She goes and grabs a torch, and to her horror, there's the numbers marked from 1 to 10. She screamed and sprinted downstairs, grabbed me, and gone to wait in a neighbour's house until my dad come home. What's worse is my dad didn't even believe her until he saw the numbers for himself. He always thought I was daydreaming or just making it up for attention, but seeing them numbers was what really shook him. After this, we quickly moved houses, and I don't know what come of that place. I live in the suburbs, where across the road is a forest which eventually backs up onto a river. Last night around midnight, my dog was scratching at the front door, wanting to be let out to pee. Usually I just let her out in the backyard, but it being a nice summer night anyway, I put her on a leash and let her across the street to the forest so she could do her business. But as soon as we got across the street, she started tugging on the leash and growling, looking towards the forest. I look up and notice a dozen twinkling lights coming from the otherwise pitch black forest, as if people are shining flashlights in my direction. I freaked out, picked up my dog and ran all the way home, looking behind me the whole time. I ran up to my bedroom, which has a pretty good view of the forest, and I began watching out my window. I saw about a dozen men walk out carrying flashlights. They looked as though they were wearing suits in the forest, but the only light I had was a street lamp, so they may have been wearing full black outfits. A couple of them were carrying different briefcases, and about 4 of them were carrying a door. Yep, a random door off its hinges. Then trailing behind them is a woman in a white dress. They walk to the middle of the forest, where the girl proceeds to squat down and pee in the middle of the street. It was then that my neighbour down the road, who I'm guessing saw the flashlights through his window, started screaming, "Hey, what are you doing?" to where the group of people just turned around and casually walked back across the street and into the forest. Deeper now. I woke up my parents, who believed me, but think that I truly just had a bad dream until the morning, when all of the neighbours were outside talking about the occurrence. Word started travelling around the block, and now everyone's talking about it. A couple of neighbours have already called law enforcement about it to keep an eye on our forest/street. There's a ton of rumours going around that they're a cult. I'm just glad I got out of there though when I did. God knows what would have happened if they found me out on my own in the forest. It scares the heck out of me walking home alone at night now too. This was a couple of months ago. I was staying the night at my SO's house. We're laying in bed watching TV. Her 2 daughters, aged 5 and 8, came into the room. The 5-year-old was leaning against my side of the bed and looking over my chest towards her mother, whose side of the bed is near the wall. The 5-year-old says, "Who's that lady?" Me, thinking she's being silly, says, "That's your mum." But she says no, the lady behind her. She was staring at the wall, looking at eye level, where about a person's eye would be if they're standing there. This gives me chills, so my girlfriend, who was chatting with her other daughter, didn't hear the exchange. Later when I tell her, she gets freaked out and told me that she's pretty sure the place is haunted. Apparently she's had all sorts of stuff happen. Now when I go over there, I get paranoid and have this eerie feeling. I haven't had any experiences like it since, but I've not been there for too long. I really hope there's no more. So some brief background. I work for a company that answers phones and takes messages for businesses when they're closed and out for lunch. Now, we answer for a variety of companies in different fields, including funeral homes. The situation has happened twice that I have spoken to a person myself on the phone, and a few other times as well, and I think it's very interesting. I thought maybe I could discuss it with you. So the first time it happened, I took the message from this lady whose mother passed away recently. The body was already picked up and dressed and all that, and was scheduled for the funeral the following day. She calls and is weepy and says if her mother's phone is still in her jacket pocket because they just got a call from her number. I ended up dispatching the call, calling the director to deliver the message verbally, and he says that he'll call her, but the body is in the casket and closed. Waiting in their parlour, I say, wow, weird, and he kind of chuckles and says, this kind of thing happens more than you think. It's been a year or so since that call, and I just yesterday got another call from another funeral home, and other people I work with have had similar types of stories. It's really creepy and interesting to me at the same time.